Good evening. This is Jimmy Sullivan with Rutherford County Schools Curriculum and Instruction. We wanted to take several minutes and provide some information about instruction, and also just to take some time and review kind of where we are and where we've been and where we are going as far as a school system and instruction looks. First and foremost, our ultimate goal outside of learning, more important than that, is student safety. And so the opening of school this year in the traditional and distance learning format overall has been very successful when we think about students being safe and having parents have that option of education. Is education and learning where we want it to be right now? No, I think every educator would agree with that. Basically, what we have asked educators to do is change everything they know about effective instructional practices. There are many things over the last couple of decades that research has proven that are highly effective instructional strategies for kids to learn that, due to the pandemic and social distancing, aren't necessarily the best practice for keeping kids safe, even though for them to learn, we realize that's something that's important for them to do. And so ultimately, student safety is of the most important for us. And so that is what we've really been focused on. In talking about that, I know there's also, in retrospect, you always reflect and look at ways to improve and things you could have done different. You know, there's an argument that why didn't we start traditional learners on one schedule and distance learners a couple days later? Ultimately, that really falls down to our requirement as a district, is we have to provide 180 instructional days for our students. If we start our kids on a different calendar, then our state board is going to have to approve our groups starting at different times, and they're going to be operating on different calendars, which brings an another set of logistical issues. But we definitely understand, especially as we've moved through these first couple weeks, the focus hasn't entirely been where it needs to be as far as instruction goes. But we also understand that we are asking us and our teachers and students to adapt to a situation that is not for anything that they're used to doing. So we are going to take a couple minutes and just talk about kind of the timeline and where we've been, just to discuss some misnomers about education. When the World for Instruction basically stopped on March 13th, that's when we had our first case, and we closed from March 13th until April 15th. Really the hope and goal is for students to come back. So much so, even from the state of Tennessee, we received TCAP testing boxes up until the week of April 8th, which was the same week that the governor recommended that states remain closed, that the schools remain closed for the year. So that truly was the intent. From April 15th until May 27th, our focus was on providing district resources, and then our kids coming back in very small groups to the school to be able to get supplies and the things that they left in the building. Yes, there are probably some things that in preparing, if we know now what we know, or if we know then what we know now, that we could have done some things around preparing for right now. But there are also some issues around logistics that you'll hear me talk about in just a minute as well that would preclude that. So our teachers, another misnomer is around teachers working in the summer. Our teachers are actually contracted for 10 months. Teachers are contracted this year from August 3rd until May 27th. Yes, they get paid in the summer. They get paid in the summer because they actually take their paychecks and they split them for the 10 months that they work around 12 months so that they actually can live. They are not contracted nor paid to be working in the summer, as that's not something even in the state expectation of 180 to 200 instructional days and teacher contracts that teachers are paid for. And so that is definitely one of the things we want to make sure that we reiterate. For us to bring back our teachers early would have had a huge fiscal impact on our overall budget and our overall operating budget for a county. As a county, we are very fiscally conservative with our funds. We did not have a property tax increase again this year. And when you think about where that leads us, our entire budget this year increased by 0.9%, even though our student enrollment increased from 2.4%. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds from looking at things at a financial standpoint, but ultimately we're a public institution and we are funded by our governing body, or in our funding body, the county commission, state of Tennessee, and the federal government will receive some funds from them as well. That brings us to kind of part of the issue of why weren't we training teachers on new platforms in May? Being a public institution, our fiscal year runs from July 1st until June 30th. Our budget process begins very early in the year previous. So our budget for the 2019-20 school year, we started in December. Principals submit budgets, county department chairs submit budgets. We actually have those approved by our school board in March and April. They have to go to different levels of our local government, from health and ed to finance to finally the full county commission approval before June 30th, so our new fiscal year can start July 1st. And I know that's a lot of information that many of you, quite frankly, probably don't care about, but it's something that is good to just have as a knowledge base of, as a district, we actually operate in a deficit every single year and have for multiple years, going back several years. We operate and have to go into our ending fund balance. We are adding, even this year, as of right now, over 900 students, even in the middle of a pandemic, from where we were at the same time last year. And that old adage that growth doesn't pay for itself, it truly doesn't when you think about it from an educational standpoint. The state funds positions with the BEP formula, and they fund those at different levels. And I'll just give you an example. They fund you at 1 to 25 for 7th through 9th grade, and 1 to 22 for 10th through 12th grade. So that may be what they fund you for a position for, but class size averages allow it to be 1 to 30 at that same standpoint. So all of that to say, yes, the state may fund you at a certain level, but you can have many more students in a class than that by those same allocations and same laws the state kind of gives you, or policies, I guess. That gets us then into devices and platforms, and we want to just take a couple minutes and kind of look at that. From a technology standpoint, we already mentioned that for a year, our budget, actually, we go into the deficit to operate. And our budget is a spending plan. It's not this is exactly how much we are going to spend. So we try not to spend every single year what we have budgeted, knowing that we are going into our ending fund balance every single year. What that means for us is we purchased devices in May when we realized that, yes, the pandemic and we need to have devices. We are a 2-to-1 district and have been a 2-to-1 district. What that means is we have one device for every 2 students. That has been our platform for a district our size. That was a very lofty goal, especially when you consider where we are in enrollment. So we are a 2-to-1 district. We were actually ahead of our 2-to-1 plan rollout from about 4 years ago. We were 2-to-1 in middle school, 2-to-1 in high school. The plan this year was 2-to-1 in elementary school. We started in 4th and 5th grade and got a little bit ahead, and started to purchase our 2-to-1 through K through 4 in May, which would have been a very traditional, actually about a month ahead from when we normally do. Those devices that were ordered in May and June actually are still not here. We ordered those from Dell. They had a estimated ship date of August 18th. They are still in pre-production as of today. I know then we have a conversation around, I know the government gave you the CARES Act money. Why don't you use CARES Act money? We absolutely used CARES Act money, but the CARES Act comes from a government entity as well, and the government entity begins their fiscal year on July 1st. We received our CARES Act money on July 2nd. We actually borrowed a little bit from our general purpose at the local level to be able to purchase it before, because as though we receive our CARES Act July 2nd, it being such a big grant, it has to be processed at the state and then the local level for us to even have access to those. So we purchased an extra 14,000 devices the very 1st of July. Those devices have a ship date of anywhere between January and February of 2021. While that's not necessarily trying to make an excuse, it's just the reality of where we are with devices. All that to say, if a parent needed a device, or if a student needs a device that is truly they don't have one at home, or they are struggling at home, please reach out to your individual school. Every request that we know of, we have fulfilled at this time, but we do ask that truly out of need, where we are as a district. If you need a device, let us know, but if you have a device at home, absolutely continue to use that device at home as well. We have checked with multiple vendors. Us being a local government and a government entity, we have to go through state contracts. So the option to go out to local businesses and buy computers and buy mobile hotspots, that's us being government, that's not necessarily an option that unfortunately we're able to take. So I did just want to give you a couple updates about that. Same thing with our platforms holds true. So we purchased Kidem. Kidem was a K through 5 platform as part of our English language arts adoption. We had a brand new textbook for all of English, but especially for English and reading K-5, Kidem was our platform. We went to multiple platforms and talked to them. Quite frankly, we were looking at Canvas, which is another platform. When we met with Canvas in April, they were not able to even begin a rollout for us until October. And so that took that off the plate. We could have put things on our website like we did with teacher resources, but we also knew that when we have Microsoft Teams and Zoom links, we didn't need those necessarily on our website to where anybody in society, for student privacy and just to protect all of aspects, we didn't need just open links to our instruction and to our kids posted in just an avenue that anybody could access. And so we needed a platform. We also looked at another one called Blackboard. We've used Blackboard for our RCS learning that we've had in the past. That was not an option because we were not even getting feedback on things that we were getting that we had currently. We looked at a couple other platforms because that's been a big question by parents of, I see some other districts who just enrolled their students in a virtual school and are using a curriculum that the virtual school has. Yes, that may be easy in theory, but in reality, you're not getting a Tennessee curriculum or any potential local teachers. In connecting that to the virtual school, we have started looking at a virtual school about 1.5 years ago, actually. We applied officially for our virtual school late last spring. We did not receive our fine. We applied for 3rd through 12th grade. We did not receive approval until the very end of July, I believe July 28th or 29th. And we were only approved from the State Department through 9th through 12th grade. We appealed and were able to add 6th through 12th grade at the very last second. But we were not able to get that 3rd, 4th, and 5th. We plan to add that. But again, we'll have to ask for permission and to be able to add that. So that talks a little bit about our virtual school. Yes, some districts were able to enroll their students in their virtual school. Well, that wasn't an option that was afforded to us. The other part of that, when you think about a virtual school, is our teachers. We wanted our students to have access to Rutherford County teachers. Some virtual platforms have access to teachers who may be nationwide and have no idea what is going on in Tennessee or at a local level. And they are also then controlled by the vendor. And if we have an issue, you'd have to go through the vendor and not necessarily through Rutherford County so that we can correct those. And those were risks that we were not willing to take to ensure the sanctity of our instructional program here in Rutherford County. And the last thing that I really want to talk about was distance learning. Of course, that is not where we want it to be, but you have our promise that we are continuing to improve every single day. We are finishing day 16, full day of having I believe it's 16, of having our full distance learning platform. Distance learning and traditional learning, those are not two avenues that are sustainable and offering at exactly the same time forever. Instead, we know that distance learning and virtual learning is going to have a place. Education is forever changed. But there are some things that you can do in a traditional setting that in trying to blend traditional and distance, like group work, for example, and hands-on activities that have to look different. And so we have to offer different platforms for that. The ultimate goal is to be able to get our students back in school when it is safe to be able to do so, so that they can learn in that traditional format. But we also realize that some students may have exceeded and may need, for various reasons, that distance learning platform. As we move forward and hopefully start moving kids to traditional and eventually get there, we will have those two different platforms to where a student that's in traditional will attend traditionally. A student that is needing to attend virtually will attend through our virtual school with Rutherford County teachers using our Rutherford County curriculum. So that's kind of the, if you will, long-term goal. As we know that current trying to do both in with the same teacher isn't necessarily the best practice of what we're doing. So talking about distance learning, part of the frustration is about using multiple platforms, and understand that we definitely hear that concern. In looking at multiple avenues as educators, we look for what are the ways that we can reach our kids and reach them in different ways. For example, every kid is assigned and connected in our Skyward through Kidem then to every class they take. Just as you would in a traditional sense, every class has its own separate content. And unfortunately, in a distance learning, that's going to require a separate click. That's going to require a separate textbook for every single course. When you think about then being inside of a math class, for example, a math class cannot be a straight lecture, even in a distance setting for 15, 30, 45 minutes. Being that we aren't in person with our kids, we actually, what educators are trained in to go through is to change activities basically every minute for however old a child is. So if a child is 12, then we need to do some type of breakup of what we're doing every 12 minutes. If they're 18, we break it up about every 18 minutes. That doesn't mean we change necessarily activities or platforms. It means we give them an opportunity to maybe turn and talk to a partner, maybe be able to write some things down instead of listening to the teacher. In a distance format, that looks a little different, and that we have multiple things we may ask them to go to in K-8 iReady, or look at Desmos, or look at Khan Academy, or look at a teacher recorded video. Those look different. And while we will continue, I assure you, to work at ways to simplify the different and all the different links and clicks that you have to go to, the intent is truly to provide different experiences, as we know that kids learn differently. But we also understand trying to put that in a mode that is as simple as possible for our kids to be able to follow. The other part of that is in looking at why did some schools not do a distance learning teacher and some schools do a traditional teacher with distance learners in their classroom? How come at a district level you couldn't mandate that from the beginning? That truly goes down to how we are staffed. I will give you an example of an elementary school. It's a smaller elementary school. They have about 40 kids per grade level. And that, with 40 kids per grade level, means they have 2 teachers. If they have 6 kids that choose distance learning, that's going to leave 34 other kids that are going to have to do traditional. One, class size averages. The state tells us how big classes can and cannot be. The other part of that we would go over is it'd be impossible to social distance with that many kids in the classroom. So while I know it is easy just to think assign a distance learning teacher or assign a traditional teacher, in theory and in practice, those are 2 different things, as our schools are all staffed differently based on the needs of their kids and how many kids they have. And as you get into the middle and high school, you're also looking at certifications. 7th through 12th grade, they all have specialized certifications. And depending on what programming that school offers, high school specifically, you may only have 1 or 2 teachers that are in that entire department. And so to assign one of those as a traditional teacher and one of those as a distance teacher isn't necessarily possible for all of those reasons. And I know, again, this is all as information so that we all can be on the same page and understand how and why these decisions are made. Another argument is then, why do we not just hire a bunch of distance learning teachers? That goes back to when I talk about budgetary reasons. As a district, we had 10 growth positions for the entire district this year. That old adage again of growth not paying for itself. In previous years, we've had 54 growth positions. Being in a recession in March and April when our budget is due, we were approved for 10 growth positions. Those 10 positions would not support 2 schools of our 48 campuses for straight distance learning teachers. So those are just some of the logistical situations behind. The other part of that, there are not enough licensed teachers to currently fill open positions across the country in Tennessee and Middle Tennessee. We do very well in Rutherford County as far as filling our open positions. But if we were to hire just distance learning positions, it would be very difficult for us not only to have a certain number of teachers to support that, but also to have high quality teachers supporting that. So those are just kind of some scenarios about where we are and why we are and where do we go for distance learning. And so just kind of some closing thoughts of where we are. When we are talking about instruction, we follow state standards, and we have a Rutherford County curriculum that we follow for all of those content areas, and we want Rutherford County educators providing that. I know that, again, we are asking for patience as we improve. There is, and I know that patience can wear thin, and we truly understand and respect that, but we also are in that same boat with our teachers. We ask that you give our teachers patience as they are adapting, as I mentioned at the very beginning, to support 2 roles in which they have never been trained, and it is not the way that education is meant to necessarily occur. It is a a profession that involves human interaction and involves being and developing relationships and involves certain instructional practices that right now, due to the pandemic and social distancing, aren't necessarily possible. And again, while I know it's hard to realize, I cannot say enough how proud we are of our teachers and the work that they do. But we also understand the frustrations and the challenges that puts on our families, as you are now faced with trying to support our curriculum while being a teacher at home. And then that's not the intent at all either. And I say all that to assure you that we are all on the same page. We're all working in the state of Tennessee. You know, we were one of the first states to go back to school. And that's why we get so much coverage right now. There are a lot of states that are not even back to school yet. And so that's unfortunate that there's nobody before us, if you will, to learn some of these valuable lessons. But we are excited that we actually have our kids back in school, regardless of that format that we are with. The other part I ask is that when we were communicating, I know we were very used to, especially in thinking about opening the school, how do we open traditional distance learning, contacting the school board and those type of things to let them know. We usually, as an instruction department and at the school level, can solve a problem within 30 minutes to an hour if we're made aware of it. The more channels and the further you get away from the school, and that's not saying, of course, feel free, they're your elected board members, contact them as much as you would like about these issues. But for the quickest response, give our teachers and our schools the information. If you are not satisfied, let our central office, or if you are having a hard time, let myself or our central office instructional team know. And we can usually solve those for you very quickly. Because when it gets to a board member, that's ultimately going to get to us as well. And that is then going to take longer for us to solve. When again, we usually can solve any issue that arises within 30 minutes to an hour in the largest majority of cases that we have. Again, I know this was a lengthy video, but we did want to take just some time and kind of clear the air of where we are with instruction. Where do we plan on going with instruction? To reiterate that, we realize that traditional and distance are two separate things. We will learn things through this that we will continue to incorporate, that virtual learning has allowed us to realize as teachers is a good practice. But we also realize that in supporting both of them, they are two different distinct settings that need to be supported differently. And contacting your teachers, especially the ones that are doing traditional and distance, we ask to give them patience. They are working with, and give them time. They are working with their kids usually from 8 to 3. And then they also have families outside that they're working with families. So allow our educators 24 hours to be able to contact and get an answer. If it is an emergency, again, please contact the school or instruction department, and we can contact that and get that fixed usually much quicker in that situation. Again, all that to say thank you. We are continuing to charge through trying to provide the best possible education to our kids in a setting that is completely safe and as safe as possible for our kids to be there. I assure you we are partners in this, and we will continue to work to improve this every single day. Thank you and have a great weekend.